This is Topic 2, Lesson 4, the Phoenicians. Make sure you have your digital notebook open. It's in your Google Classroom under Topic 2, Lesson 4 heading.
Lesson 4. The Phoenicians. The Mediterranean Sea forms the western boundary of the Fertile Crescent. The Phoenician civilization began here, on a thin strip of land along the Mediterranean coast, in what is now Lebanon. Like Sumer, Phoenicia consisted of city-states. Although Phoenicia was small in size, it had an important influence on the region's history.
All right, let's go ahead and watch this video.
Knowing our ABCs opens the door to reading and writing. By learning just 26 letters, we share complex ideas or lose ourselves in a world of stories. In English-speaking countries, we're taught the letters of the English alphabet. Have you ever wondered where those letters came from? You might think it was the Greeks. After all, the word alphabet comes from the first two Greek letters, alpha and beta, like our A and B. That's a good guess. However, the Greeks learned their form of writing from the Phoenicians, a Mediterranean people who were intrepid traders and merchants. Before the Phoenicians, the main written language used a series of symbols called cuneiform. Interestingly, cuneiform is a writing system, not a language, and it doesn't have letters. It uses roughly 600 to 1,000 symbols to create syllables or words. This means that cuneiform is not an alphabet. So, why did the Phoenicians create a new writing system that consisted of only 22 letters? To answer that, you need to understand who the Phoenicians were. Phoenicians didn't have many natural resources of their own in the small kingdom they controlled near present-day Lebanon. So, they had to trade for what they needed. They were excellent sailors who navigated throughout the Mediterranean Sea and beyond, down the coast of Africa and up the coast of Spain, all the way to Britain. Can you think of any reason a simple written language would be useful? Consider the number of different people with whom the Phoenicians traded and the many languages they spoke. Also, think about all the records a Phoenician trader had to keep. Sales and orders, cargo lists, ships and destinations, reports about clients, and even news. You get the idea. Now, which of these two options would be easier? Teach all of your trading partners the hundreds of cuneiform symbols needed to communicate, or create a simple 22-letter alphabet that everyone could learn? Let's see how the Phoenician alphabet influenced our English alphabet. Here are 4 Phoenician letters. The Greeks and Phoenicians were trading partners, and the Greeks based their alphabet on the Phoenicians. These are the ancient Greek letters. Eventually, the Romans used the Greek alphabet as a basis for the Latin language. As the Romans built their empire, Latin became a common language from Italy all the way to Britain, where it became the English ABCs. Why do you think the use of the Phoenician alphabet by the Greeks and Romans was so important?
Great question. All right, let's continue on. We have 6 vocabulary words. We have import, good or service sold within a country that is produced in another country. Export, good or service produced within a country and sold outside of that country. Navigation, art of steering a ship from place to place. Colony, group of people living in a new territory with ties to a distant state. Cultural diffusion, spread of cultural traits from one culture to another. And alphabet, small set of letters or symbols, each of which stands for a single sound. Go ahead and get your pages 1 and 2 of your digital notebook completely filled out. These are your 6 vocab words. All right, let's move on to page 3. We will click next one time in our Savas if you are following along that way. If you are following along in my video, that is fine as well.
Who were the Phoenicians? The Phoenicians were fearless sailors who guided ships full of trade goods through ocean waters. For hundreds of years, they dominated sea trade across the Mediterranean, just as the earlier Greek Minoan people had done. Origins. Phoenician society developed from the earlier Canaanites. The Canaanites were a people who lived in parts of what are now Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. Nearby Egypt had a strong influence on Canaan. In fact, Egypt controlled parts of Canaan off and on from around 1500 BCE to 1150 BCE. Phoenician society began to emerge after Egyptian rule ended. The independent Phoenician city-states soon prospered. In general, the rulers of Phoenician city-states were priest-kings who shared power with leading merchant families and a citizen assembly. Farming and manufacturing. Geography greatly influenced Phoenicia's development. The Lebanon Mountains formed Phoenicia's eastern border. These heavily forested mountains sloped down close to the Mediterranean coast, leaving little flatland for farming. Phoenicians manufactured a number of goods. Weavers created cloth that they colored with a rare purple dye made from tiny sea snails. They sold this purple cloth for high prices. Skilled Phoenician craftsworkers made pottery and glass and metal objects. They also used trees to make wood furniture. Phoenician traders. Phoenicia had few natural resources of its own, so the Phoenicians traded with other cultures for resources and goods. Phoenician traders brought back many imports. An import is a good or service sold within a country that is produced in another country. Most Phoenician imports were raw materials, including gold, silver, tin, copper, iron, ivory, and precious stones. Phoenician craftsworkers used these raw materials to make bronze and silver bowls, iron tools and weapons, and gold jewelry. Traders shipped these goods, as well as pine and cedar logs, wine, olive oil, salt, fish, and other goods, as exports to ports across the Mediterranean. An export is a good or service produced within a country and sold outside the country's borders.
Number 1, what were the products that Phoenicia, I guess that's how they pronounce it, I call it Phoenicia, imported? In this blue highlighted paragraph, you will find that answer. Number 2, and this is a quiz question, the goods made and shipped by Phoenicians to other lands are called what? Oops, I don't know why I put list 3 here. It's just 1. Let me get rid of that. Are called what? Go ahead in this yellow circled text, find that answer. Let's move on to page 4 of your digital notebook. Click next one more time in your Savas. If this wall is in your way, once the black tab is gone, go ahead and get it out of your way.
How did Phoenicians use the sea? Phoenicia's location was ideal for trade. It lay on the western edge of Asia, within sailing distance of Europe and Africa. Several overland trade routes from the east ended in Phoenicia. As a result, many peoples came to depend on the Phoenicians to ship their trade goods across the Mediterranean Sea. Navigation. Because of Phoenicia's location between the Mediterranean and the Lebanon Mountains, Phoenicians turned to the sea to trade. They became experts at navigation, or the art of steering a ship from place to place. Phoenician sailors developed a thorough knowledge of wind patterns and ocean currents. At first, the Phoenicians sailed and traded among nearby lands. Later, they took their ships to new areas.
Number 1, where was the Phoenician Empire located? In this pink highlighted paragraph, you'll find that answer. Number 2, how did geography influence Phoenician development? This green highlighted paragraph, you will find that answer. All right, let's move on to page 5 and we'll continue right here.
Exploring unknown waters. From Phoenicia, the Phoenicians sailed south and west past Egypt and along the North African coast. Others traveled north and west past the Balkan and Italian peninsulas. They explored the Mediterranean islands of Sicily and Sardinia. In time, the Phoenicians reached the Iberian Peninsula at the western end of the Mediterranean Sea. Today, this land includes Spain and Portugal. After passing the southern tip of Iberia, Phoenician sailors left the Mediterranean for the Atlantic Ocean. Some sailed north along the Iberian coast, and a few traveled all the way to Britain. Others headed south to West Africa. Phoenician sailors showed great courage by sailing far into unknown waters. But why did they keep traveling ever farther from home? Some historians think that the Phoenicians were driven to find precious metals. Indeed, the Phoenicians traded for silver in Iberia and gold in West Africa. An ancient Greek historian described how Phoenicians profited from the silver trade. Primary source. Now the natives were ignorant of the use of the silver, and the Phoenicians purchased the silver in exchange for other goods of little, if any, worth. And this was the reason why the Phoenicians, as they transported this silver to Greece and Asia and to all other peoples, acquired great wealth. Diodorus Siculus, Library of History.
Number 3, why did Phoenicians keep traveling farther from home? In this blue highlighted paragraph, you should find that answer.
Colonies and city-states. Phoenician sailors found many sheltered harbors along the Mediterranean coast. At first, these places served as trading stations where ships stopped to pick up water, food, and other supplies. Those areas with fertile land or other resources attracted farmers and other settlers. Those settlements grew into colonies. A colony is an area ruled by a distant country. When Phoenicia came under attack by Assyrians and others starting in the 800s BCE, many Phoenicians left Phoenicia. They migrated to their colonies for safety.
Number 4, an area ruled by a distant country is called, you'll find that answer in this first circled yellow paragraph. Let's move on to page 6 of our digital notebook.
A few Phoenician colonies developed into wealthy city-states. One was Carthage on the North African coast. Carthage eventually became rich and powerful, setting up its own colonies and fighting 3 wars against the powerful Romans. In the last of these wars, the Romans destroyed Carthage. Over time, the Roman Empire took over all of the Phoenician city-states and colonies.
Number 5, which city was originally a Phoenician colony? You'll find that quiz question answer in this circled yellow text. Let's move on to page 7 of our digital notebook. If you're in Savas, we're clicking next. This would be 3 clicks of next.
What is the cultural legacy of the Phoenicians? Phoenicia did not survive, but some of its achievements did last. Greece and Rome absorbed parts of Phoenician culture through cultural diffusion. Cultural diffusion is the spreading of cultural traits from one region to another. The Phoenicians' legacy included the spread of its culture and a new way of writing. Links to other societies. Through trade, the Phoenicians linked the diverse peoples and cultures around the Mediterranean region and beyond. In the process, Phoenicians helped ideas spread. They passed parts of their culture on to the Greeks. For example, the Greeks used the Phoenician standard of weights and measures. Greek culture later spread throughout the entire Mediterranean region, and its influence continues today.
Number 1, what is cultural diffusion? You'll find that answer in this pink highlighted paragraph. Number 2, why were the Phoenicians able to spread their culture over a wide area? You'll find that answer in this circled yellow paragraph. This is a quiz question. Let's move on to the last page, page 8 in our digital notebook.
The alphabet. The Greeks also adopted the Phoenician way of writing. Before the Phoenicians, the main writing system in the ancient Near East was cuneiform. In cuneiform, symbols represent syllables or whole words. In order to be able to write, a person had to learn and remember hundreds of symbols. The Phoenicians developed an alphabet. An alphabet is a small set of letters or symbols, each of which stands for a single sound. The Phoenician alphabet had 22 symbols. Each symbol stood for a consonant sound. This new approach to writing was a major improvement over cuneiform. Now, instead of having to memorize hundreds of different symbols, a person only had to know 22 symbols in order to write. This alphabet made writing much easier to learn, making it possible for more people to learn how to write. People who traded with the Phoenicians learned their alphabet in order to communicate with them. By 750 BCE, the Greeks had begun using the Phoenician alphabet. Around 500 BCE, the Greeks added letters to represent vowels. They also gave the letters names. The word alphabet comes from the first two letters in the Greek alphabet, alpha and beta. Around 100 BCE, the Romans adopted the Greek alphabet. The Romans changed some letters. The result was an alphabet that looks much like ours today. The Romans carried their culture across much of Europe and into other lands. Their language and system of writing was adopted in those lands. Through that process, it passed into widespread use. While it is the Roman form of writing that became the alphabet used to write English, that writing system had its origins in ancient Phoenicia.
Number 3, in the Phoenician alphabet, symbols were used to represent what? You'll find that answer in this yellow circled paragraph. Number 4, how did Phoenician culture, particularly its alphabet, affect later cultures? You'll find that answer in this green highlighted paragraph.